Is today Thursday? Today's Thursday.
Yes.
Today's Thursday, and in the apocalypse, the most relevant piece of information that pops into my head about today being Thursday is that I have to take out the garbage tonight. That's like my minimum bar for surviving the apocalypse is I'm going to take the garbage out tonight because with everybody home, there's just a ridiculous amount of garbage, and I don't want to talk about it. Hi, guys. I'm Mike. I'm here with Molly. We're going to
Hello.
talk about all kinds of fun things. What I want to do tonight before we get started is just remind you that on Sunday, Nick Rishwain is a lonely, desperate, sad man, and he's a friend of mine because he pays me. And every Sunday we do Ask Twinsies, a show in which you guys ask for advice, and we give you terrible advice in return. It's never serious, and I really pity the fool who takes us seriously. But ask some questions. We need some Ask Twinsies questions. So anywhere on social, just use the hashtag Ask Twinsies. So real quick, before we get started, I wanted to share a few resources that are going to kind of frame the conversation that Molly and I are going to have tonight. First of all, I wanted to now that the crazy has died down about this article, I wanted to share. Let me if I can get the screen to share. There we go. This article of this woman, this poor lady. I'll scroll down real quick to this part. We have withheld Amy's last name and her husband's name because of threats made against their family, which is really jacked up. People, after they wrote this article about this woman staying home during COVID, people were like super mean to them. The short version of this article that I will share with you guys is that this lady had a company and her husband was staying home, and it just didn't go very well. The husband was having a really hard time being the one staying home, and the child, I guess, was not cooperating with him at all or something. And he just couldn't do it. He just didn't feel capable of doing it. And so the wife actually closed her company, laying off some handful of people, and the internet went insane over this engagement. And I think at the time I probably made a joke about I can teach him how to cook or something because it's really not that hard. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that and about the burden that is being disproportionately borne by women during this COVID time. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was this article from The Atlantic called Never Go Back to the Office. And I've seen both sides of this, why people would go back to the office, why they wouldn't. And so we'll chat a little bit about that. And then the last thing I wanted to share while we're here is this website, hiringandempowering.com, which is Molly's site for her recruiting, her legal recruiting business. So that's what we're talking about tonight. Molly, I'm coming back to you. Let me push a button. How are you tonight?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're Mountain Time, right? So you're not mad
I
at me right now. Well, you could be. Are you after dinner? I get in trouble for doing things at this hour because people want to, be at home. But this is the only time my house is quiet.
Mine too. Yeah, my kids are 18 and 14. So when I told them I had this tonight, they were excited. They get to go
Hide in
be
the
on
room.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My kids get to do that all freaking day, which is actually one of the articles that we wanted to talk about. I was curious about your perspective, especially because you've been working at home for quite a while. And before we get on, you and I were talking about this thing where, like, I can go work at a Panera and there's all this buzz in the background because none of the buzz is for me. I don't pay attention to any of it. Nobody at Panera is trying to get my attention. It's just noise. But when you're at home, that exact same kind of noise is your noise. It's like noise for you. And so I was curious about, for women who are coming home for the first time with kids at home and trying to, get into this work-life thing, how do you just tell your kids to go out? Do you tie them down? Do you have basements in Colorado and you just tie them down into the basement? What do you do?
Well, interestingly enough, I think I was sharing this with you. I've worked from home for 19 years now when I was pregnant with my oldest son. And I got an office actually 2 years ago. And the reason I went and got an office was because my kids, I trained them so well when they were younger on how to write sticky notes and hand me sticky notes. I gave them some best practice approaches for how to interrupt me when I was working. But now, since they were teenagers, it just, to your point, you could work in Panera or coffee shop or anywhere, but I could hear them open a wrapper in their bedroom and it would send me through the ceiling. I'd be like, all right, what are you eating? What are you doing down
Right.
there? I'd hear every single noise and they felt like prisoners in their own house, especially with split schedules and my son driving and coming home. And for me, I made the decision because at that time I started doing videos, Facebook Live. I started a podcast where I was constantly on film and video. And that's been a real great saving grace for me. But working from home, I feel for so many mothers. I remember when my kids were little, you just felt like you're a failure all day, every day.
Yeah.
They just could not win.
Which, you are, right? Like, maybe that's the thing that's really baffled me woken me up about this whole thing, is none of us can do the thing that schools do, right? Where they're on all the time, they're entertained all the time. And I sort of wonder why the heck we have that expectation. That article that I shared, there was this mom that said something to the effect of, well, school only lasts 3 hours a day, and then I have to plan the rest of the day for them myself. And I'm like, what? I don't know. I grew up with 8 kids. My mom put us in the basement. I had my Knight Rider big wheel. We had an unfinished basement, and I would ride around on my Knight Rider big wheel for like 3 hours straight, just screaming in the basement. I'm wondering how much of this anxiety that we have, especially for mothers, relates to reality, and how much of it relates to just that fear that we have of not being some TV mom.
I love that question because, even though I've worked from home for 17 years, I grew up one of 6 in the Irish Catholic family. Same thing. You were kicked out of the house. You weren't allowed to come back till dinner, out of sight.
Yeah.
They just sit on it. And we all turned out great. And it was the first 2 weeks of this pandemic where I was coming unglued. My anxiety was through the roof. And to your point, I actually called the school counselor. I'm like, I'm not fit for this job. What are you doing? What's the schedule? I had a long conversation with her, and it was until she kind of gave me permission and said, listen, you need to back off. It's not your job to constantly entertain them. That's the approach that we're taking, and here's why. And we had this conversation, and it wasn't, I backed off a little bit, but I still had this feeling like I'm a horrible parent. I don't know what my kids are doing in the room all day. They're on YouTube, they're on Netflix. How much are they learning, etc. And it wasn't until my son said to me, Mom, it's not your job to entertain us all day. To your point, he said in school they don't even do all of this, and you're making yourself crazy. Here's the deal. I said, I need an hour of your time for us to go out at lunch, take a walk, exercise, what have you. Update me on what your day looks like, what you have expected of you, and I'll back off. Everything changed for us. Everything changed for us because I was putting so much pressure on myself, and I was judging myself because I felt like I was being a horrible parent, which is keeping me, and I wasn't present at work either. I just felt like I was failing everywhere.
Which, to be fair, kids are also assholes. And so, like, my kids will come to, if I've got a day where I don't feel like cooking because I've been working I've got something in my brain and I don't want to deal with cooking, my kids will seriously still be like, you're really not cooking today? I'm like, are you kidding me? You're like 16 years old. Here's a pan. Here's some eggs. Grow the freak up. Like, sometimes I feel like my kids, okay, are your kids of an age that you would know what Boy Meets World and Girl Meets World are? Are you familiar with these two shows?
Yes.
So my daughters, for some reason, got really into the Girl Meets World show to the point that my daughter, my now 14-year-old, said that my wife and I were like Corey and Topanga. She called us Topori. We were a power couple, is what she said. But like that shaped the TV shaped their idea of how entertained they were supposed to be, and to the point where it wasn't just you're supposed to go out to the barn and have some adventures. Now you're supposed to have deep conversations with your dad, who's Corey, who's also a history teacher, and fake, right? Like, my kids just don't. These are fake people. They're not They're not real. Most of us suck most of the time. It's okay. But I do feel for them. I mean, they are bored, right? Like the kids are. They're bored.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny when you use don't get a pan and make something. I tell my kids, I'm on to you because I know what your strategy is. I turn the corner and walk in the kitchen. It's like a bomb blew up, so they purposely just destroy everything. So I'm like, forget it, I'll do
Yeah.
it. Never again are you touching the kitchen.
That's my strategy actually. That's how what my wife says when I cook. There's just it's like a war zone afterwards. Well, and I don't know. So that story with the mom and the dad that couldn't deal with the kid, and so a lot of people were really uncharitable with that guy, with that person, this man who didn't seem to be able to take care of the kid and deal with the family stuff and whatever. I don't know. I go, one, my wife is a stay-at-home mom and she can't do all this crap.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I help with I mean, I do most of the cooking and I do the shopping and I do certain mom things because even she can't do all this stuff. And so I want to be a little bit charitable with this guy and with guys in general who are coming home. If you, maybe this is too personal, but if you as a mom are listing off, okay, this is what I really need. How would you advise these guys who are home now that they could do some kind of quick win thing to really make the mom and the wife feel appreciated and seen and just to take something off the plate? Don't say taking out the garbage because that's already
No.
that's man job in my house already. That's
I think the biggest, I have many of, as I was sharing with you, of my male clients who are actually home right now and their wives have a big corporate job or they work in the medical profession and they're attorneys, small practice attorneys, and whether they're essential, non-essential, what have you, they're working from home and they have such an appreciation now for their wife to the point that some of them are saying, you know, I'm going to reevaluate my schedule when I go back to the office and I'm going to start doing morning drop off to school and breakfast and things of that nature. So I would say what my clients, I advise them is sit down with your wife and say, what's your peak time? What's your peak performance time of when you really wish you just had solo time?
Right.
Most of the men are coming back and they're saying in the morning because the mornings are just so crazy and chaotic. And their wives are saying that to them so they could go to yoga, go for a walk, do whatever, stay in bed. It doesn't matter that I can choose to participate, not participate. So my number one tip would be to sit down with your wife and say, after this pandemic, I do want to contribute. I do want to help. Or if you're in the thick of it with them working, what would be your favorite time of the day where I could take it off your plate? And then create a time template from that open communication and just clarifying and verifying and checking in on where you can help, because most women I know, it's not take out the garbage. In fact, let me take out the garbage and actually go for a walk after and nobody gets to come with me. Let me go to the grocery store. Nobody gets to come with me and I can leave my cell phone at home. So for most of my working moms that I coach and or friends in my arena, that's what they want. They just want to have some sacred time alone. And
I
finding
like that.
out
Yeah, I like that idea. If you and if anybody watching went to the Clio conference this year, Daniel Pink came and talked about his book Win, and you can go watch a video about Win and get the gist of it pretty quickly. But it's basically that we have different cycles and we can't treat all of our time the same way. You should build around the times when your brain does different categories of work. Stop trying to fit the wrong categories in the wrong hours. So I like that idea of saying to a mom, like, tell me what is the block? What's the block where either you need total peace or you're doing your ninja work, right? Like this is the best time for you to do your work. We'll optimize around that block of time. You might even have the same list of tasks relatively divided, but to be able to say to a mom, you don't have to listen during this block of hours, right? Like you can do deep work during your magic hours. That's a really good idea. Thinking about that, though, like what you mentioned with when we go back to work, right? When these men go back to work and trying to adjust, there's a lot of this talk about going back to the office. Should we go back to the office? Should we not go back to the office? When we do, what's our workday look like? Do we only have 2 days at the office? Do we have 4 days and then we're not working on the weekend? What's your thinking right now on going back to an office?
I think it's a combination of, I don't think it's an either or, I think it's an and of what people are seeing. Many employees and entrepreneurs, attorneys alike, are saying they miss the office, but there are many firms that never left the office, that they've stayed working in the office depending on where they were located in the country, but they still took a virtual approach to it because their clients weren't coming into the office. And so what I'm hearing are people are being very creative, but also trying to find more of a work-life balance, taking Fridays off, working Monday through Thursday. To your point, finding your ninja working time, and maybe one person stays home on Friday and they just do their high-performing activities where they just need sacred time and they need to be in their zone and not have all the interruptions. So I'm seeing people, I'm not seeing many law firms saying they're not going back to the office, but they're finding the middle ground from that, where each person's finding what their unique abilities are, where their peak performance activities are coming from while working at home, and then being able to pick days where employees are working from home and they're very, very laser about what they're working on, and or taking Fridays off and going back to a 4-hour week, and just having more of a flex schedule that can incorporate, like you said, your favorite time for your own solo time, but also then your peak performance work time.
Yeah, it's tough because looking through the data about people working from home, only about 1/3 of the economy can choose that, right? And especially getting back to the overlap with the issue with women, women are more likely to be in service-related jobs that are more likely to require you being in an office or a workspace, because you're doing more of the emotional labor work, which is typical for women and minorities. And I also think about with women and minorities, they're paying the woman tax or the black tax, right? Like you've got to work extra hard to be able to stand out in that job. And I wonder how that's going to overlap with, maybe we shouldn't adjust to the biases that are out there, but I guess for a long time, one of the reasons that is cited for women to make less per hour than men do is that their brains are, they're moms, right? They've got worries at home. They're not fully here. They're not fully committed. All this bullshit that people say. And I guess I would worry if we isn't sending them home to be around home, like really buying into, you know what I mean? Does that make that a greater risk that hirers are going to feel like, oh, this woman or minority or whatever is not committed to the job if they're working at home? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And actually, I have a hiring company, and you would think that I was really nervous when this pandemic hit because I'm like, no one's going to be hiring right now. It took about a week where we had a slowdown, but then quickly it came up, and this is why, because people saw kind of the bottom feeder employees, if you will, that were working from home, that you can communicate, hey, I'm struggling from working from home. I got to figure out my kids' schedule, et cetera. But they didn't have the ability to have the adult conversations. They didn't have the ability to really have the clear, crucial conversations they needed to. And then they were seeing where they weren't getting work done. So actually, the stay at home, I don't think for some women, they've been able to really adjust, and it really depends on your whole home, your holistic picture of who you have at home for babysitters, family members, older siblings, spouses, things of that nature. But I think it actually shines a flashlight on the inefficiencies. And I've had many attorneys tell me that. They said, I don't ever want to go back to my office because I'm getting so much work done, because I don't walk out to go to the bathroom and have a line of people with a list of problems waiting for me. I'm actually getting so much work done. So I think it's actually been a wonderful opportunity for the attorneys that are conscious and that have KPIs, and they do have consistent communication and daily huddles and things like that in their law firm, for them to see really where there are people they're distracted, whether they're in the office or not. Their kids are blowing up their phone because they can't even tie their shoes without talking to mom 7 times. So I think that they're really seeing that, and from a
But
place.
I feel like offices are really good for churning hours. And when you've got a business model that's based on churning out, like part of the reason that I've worked at home this whole time is because it's really great for thinking. That I can jump from one space to another. I can work here for a little bit, and then I can sit in my thinking chair. I've got a Blue's Clues. It's not literally the same as Blue's Clues, but it's like a thinking chair. And I've got a couch upstairs. We've got a couch in our room. I can go on a drive in the middle. Whenever the freak. I can. There's just a lot of thinking in my day, and I feel like if a law firm has figured out how to turn their knowledge workers into knowledge workers, that working from home is really great. But I've just been wondering, how do those people who were supposed to bill whatever it was, 50 hours a week, and so they're working 60 hours a week, how the freak are they doing that at home? I don't know how people get 3 hours of billable hours in a day, much less 8,
Yeah. I mean, I know my clients are in regards, yeah, how they're doing it.
Kudos to you guys, because
Yeah.
I don't get crap done of sit down. You know what I mean? Like I've always said that my daily to-do list is only 3 items long, because I know if I can get more done, great, I'll bring some more over.
Right.
But if not, who cares? It's a 3-item day. It's still farther than I would have gotten. But I don't know. I guess when I'm thinking back to the days when I was billing hourly, you just have to be at a desk punching keyboards, doing something. And my kids just they don't cooperate.
Yeah, and I think it's a consistent training. I still have sticky notes on my in my office hanging, like one from my son when he was 3.5, and I'd be on a conference call, and it says, "Can we get a dog?" At the most inopportune time. No matter, you've seen all
Right.
the funny Zoom
Right.
videos, YouTube videos about do not come in here no matter what. And sure enough, that's
Yep.
the time to come in when you say not to. I think it's just constantly sitting down and having
Mm.
the conversation with them of just trying to pivot and try different strategies of what will work for you. And it took me a while to figure that out, but even now, it's great. My kids walk in, and if I'm like this and I won't even make eye contact with them, they know I mean business, and they're not going to get me no matter what they try.
Well, and hopefully, if nothing else, the men who are disproportionately in power in these firms, especially the larger firms, the ABA data has backed that up, and it's really sad. But hopefully, they get to the point where their kids jump into their Zoom meetings enough that they go, "Oh, this is what it's like for women all the time." And I've been kind of a jerk about that and not very understanding about it. Like you said, I hope it just wake some people up. Let's get rid of the fiction of professionalism and just realize we're all just people. We're all just folk now, to use a line from Serenity. The thing that I've been doing with my kids as a super parent has been watching old sci-fi shows with them. Like, we're just binging sci-fi shows. So we watch Firefly. We're watching one of the Stargates. Now, none of this matters to anybody but me, but we're just binging all these shows that my kids would never have watched otherwise. So anyway, you're doing weird stuff with hiring things right now. I've seen people posting in different places for, I need an associate, I need help, and some of that's shifting. If people want help to find, what are you helping with both associates and with staff, I assume?
I am. Everything from client service coordinator, receptionist, all the way up to associate or partners, or an exit strategy of finding someone to take over the law firm. So I've been doing that for about 25 years now, and it's really fun to see people shifting into the virtual world. I've had people that have hired funding coordinators to probate and trust admin, heavy, detailed bank statements and things of that nature, and they're training them virtually. It makes you really have to be very intentional around your systems and process and communication.
So how to get in touch with you? What's the best way to reach you for those kinds of services?
Sure. Yeah, you go to hiringandempowering.com. We have a weekly podcast on Tuesdays, a weekly blog on Thursdays, speaking about all things employee engagement to hiring and leadership.
Cool. All right. Thank you, guys. Remember, put your Ask Twinsies questions up on the socials. Just use the hashtag. Nick and I will give you terrible advice on Sunday. And I think that's it. We've got some other guests coming up. I think we might do this Facebook every night thing for another, maybe through the end of next week, and then we'll just sort of see as things come out of lockdown what people want. If you still want to do Facebook Lives, if so, when. Any feedback on that would be appreciated. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, Molly. Everybody have a good night.
Have a good evening.